That morning, he seemed different. He didn't make small talk over breakfast like he usually did. Instead, he was quieter, almost brooding, moving around the kitchen with an intensity I hadn't seen before. "You seem distant," he said finally, his eyes sharp. "Is everything okay?" I swallowed hard. My mind raced. How would Lila respond? Calmly, I told myself. Softly. "I'm fine," I said, copying her voice. "Just tired, I guess." He stared at me for a long time, as if he could see through me. I forced a smile, but my pulse was racing. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, to run, to call Lila, but I couldn't. Not yet. I had to finish this week. Work that day was chaotic. Lila had scheduled back-to-back meetings, and I had to answer calls, reply to emails, and interact with coworkers who knew her habits better than anyone. I was starting to notice something that worried me even more. Lila's life was built on perfection. One wrong move at home or work could ripple into disaster, and now I was the one holding it together. During lunch, I got a text from Lila. "Mark is acting off. Be careful. Don't trust anything he says." My stomach sank. Off was an understatement. I sensed it. Something was brewing, and I had no idea what it was. That evening, Mark returned home earlier than usual. He didn't say hello immediately. He just stood in the doorway, watching me. It was like he was assessing every movement, every expression, every word. "I've been thinking," he said finally, in a calm voice that made my skin crawl. "Things have been tense lately. I just want us to be honest with each other." I nodded, my mind spinning. Honesty? That wasn't possible, not right now. "Of course," I said, mimicking Lila's soft, reassuring tone. "I'll do whatever it takes." He smiled faintly, but there was a shadow in his eyes, something I couldn't quite place. I felt trapped in his gaze, like a mouse caught in a trap, and I realized just how dangerous it would be if he ever discovered the truth. Later that night, I tried to call Lila, but her phone went straight to voicemail. My anxiety spiked. I needed to know she was safe, that she wasn't in immediate danger. I sent another text. "I'm still here. Keep safe. Don't come home yet." A few minutes later, she replied, "Trust me. I'm okay. You're doing great. Just be careful with him." I closed my eyes, trying to calm myself. Pretending to be Lila wasn't just a disguise anymore. It was survival. Every word I said, every movement I made was a protective act, a shield for my sister. The next day, something happened that shook me more than anything so far. I was in the living room, carefully organizing the bookshelf the way Lila liked it, when Mark came in carrying a small envelope. He handed it to me with a faint, calculating smile. "It came for you today," he said casually. I took it, trying to remain calm. Inside was a letter from a friend of Lila's, thanking her for helping with an event last week. Innocuous, harmless, but the moment felt tense, like a test. He watched me carefully as I read it, his eyes flicking between my face and the envelope. "Thank you," I said softly, mimicking Lila perfectly. He nodded. "Of course, just don't forget, I notice everything." My heart raced. That was a warning, not a casual remark. I realized that Mark wasn't just controlling Lila. He was watching me, analyzing me, and I had no room for error. That evening, I tried to relax, but it was impossible. Every sound in the apartment made me jump. The creak of the floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator, even the wind outside the window. I couldn't let my fear show. I couldn't let him see the cracks in my facade. As I lay in Lila's bed, I thought about the week ahead. There were only a few days left, but I could already feel the tension building to a breaking point. Pretending to be Lila was exhausting, terrifying, and emotionally draining, but I had to keep going, for her safety. The turning point came the next morning. I was in the kitchen making coffee when Mark approached me. His expression was unreadable, and for a moment, I thought he was going to explode. Instead, he leaned against the counter and spoke in a low voice. "I know something's different," he said slowly. "I can feel it. You're not The same. I froze. My mind raced. Was this it? Was he about to realize the truth? I had to stay calm. "It's just stress," I said softly, copying Lila's tone perfectly. "I've been tired lately, that's all." He studied me for a long moment, his eyes sharp and calculating. Then, to my relief, he nodded. "Maybe you're right," he said finally, walking away. But the intensity in his gaze didn't leave me. I knew he was suspicious. That day, I realized something important. Mark wasn't just controlling Lila. He was observant, clever, and dangerous in subtle ways. This wasn't about open threats. It was about manipulation, testing boundaries, and watching for weaknesses. I had to be flawless. I had to think like Lila, act like Lila, and anticipate every move he might make. By evening, I was exhausted. I sat in Lila's bedroom, staring at her bruises again, feeling a mix of anger, fear, and determination. I couldn't fail. I wouldn't fail. Not for Lila, not for myself. And yet, deep down, I knew the most shocking moment of the week hadn't come yet. Something was about to happen. A revelation that would change everything I thought I knew about my sister, her husband, and the life she had been living in silence. By the 5th day, I was exhausted in every sense of the word, physically, emotionally, and mentally. Pretending to be Lila had become a full-time job, and Mark's behavior was growing increasingly unpredictable. The tension in the apartment was thick, almost tangible, like walking into a room full of static electricity. I could feel it clinging to me, making my every movement deliberate, my every word measured. That morning started normally, or as normal as it could be. I followed Lila's routine exactly, brewed coffee the way she did, tidied up the kitchen, checked her emails. But Mark's presence was heavier than ever. He lingered near the doorway, leaning casually against the wall, his eyes tracking me. I felt a chill creep down my spine. "You've been quiet," he said finally, his tone soft but edged with something sharp. "Something's going on." The next day, something happened that shook me more than anything so far. I was in the living room, carefully organizing the bookshelf the way Lila liked it, when Mark came in carrying a small envelope. He handed it to me with a faint, calculating smile. "It came for you today," he said casually. I took it, trying to remain calm. Inside was a letter from a friend of Lila's, thanking her for helping with an event last week. Innocuous, harmless, but the moment felt tense, like a test. He watched me carefully as I read it, his eyes flicking between my face and the envelope. "Thank you," I said softly, mimicking Lila perfectly. I forced a smile, carefully imitating Lila's calm demeanor. "Nothing's wrong, just tired." He didn't push further, but I could feel the scrutiny in every glance. Every step I took, every gesture I made, had to be perfect. I realized, with a sinking feeling, that the masquerade I had been maintaining was starting to crack. At work, I felt distracted, my mind looping endlessly over possible scenarios. What if Mark realized I wasn't Lila? What if he tried to test me, to expose me? I had to keep my composure no matter what. And then came a message from Lila that made my chest tighten. "Be careful, he's planning something." Planning something? My heart raced. What could she mean? I had no time to ask, no way to know. I just had to trust her instincts and continue pretending. That evening, I returned home, trying to act casual, to seem like nothing was wrong. Mark was in the living room, sitting on the couch, his expression unreadable. I felt a flicker of fear as I walked past him, aware of how my every step, my every word was being analyzed. "Sit down," he said suddenly, patting the couch beside him. My heart thudded, but I obeyed, careful to mimic Lila's body language perfectly. He handed me a glass of wine, or at least that's what I assumed it was. "You've been under a lot of stress," he said, his voice almost soothing. "Maybe you should relax for a bit." I nodded, pretending to sip, but my mind was racing. This wasn't normal. Why the sudden calm? Was he trying to lull me into a trap? And then it happened. Mark leaned closer, his tone changing ever so slightly, sharper now. "I can tell something's off," he said. "You're not yourself. I don't know why, but I can feel it. You've been hiding something from me." My stomach dropped. This was the moment I had been dreading, the moment when the mask I wore could slip. I forced a calm smile, trying to imitate Lila perfectly. "I'm fine," I said softly. "I promise. Just tired." He studied me for a long, uncomfortable moment. "I don't know," he said finally. "You've been acting different, but maybe it's just stress. I guess I'll see." I exhaled quietly, but the relief was temporary. He was suspicious, and suspicion was dangerous. I realized I had to be even more careful, more precise, and more observant. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying every interaction from the day, every glance, every word. I thought about Lila's bruises, about the letters she had hidden, about the moments she had endured quietly while keeping up the facade of a normal life. I felt both rage and sorrow. How could anyone live like this? And yet she had survived, until now. The following morning, the tension escalated further. Mark's behavior had subtly shifted. He was more attentive, more precise, almost predatory. It was like he was testing the boundaries, seeing how far he could push. Every movement I made was under scrutiny. I felt like I was trapped in a cage, and every second was a test of endurance. Then came the phone call that changed everything. It was Lila. I could hear the strain in her voice immediately. "You need to be careful," she whispered. "He's planning something. Don't let him know you're not me." "What do you mean?" I asked, my heart racing. "I can't explain now. Just trust me," she said, before hanging up abruptly. The next day, something happened that shook me more than anything so far. I was in the living room, carefully organizing the bookshelf the way Lila liked it, when Mark came in carrying a small envelope. He handed it to me with a faint, calculating smile. "It came for you today," he said casually. I took it, trying to remain calm. Inside was a letter from a friend of Lila's, thanking her for helping with an event last week. Innocuous, harmless, but the moment felt tense, like a test. He watched me carefully as I read it, his eyes flicking between my face and the envelope. "Thank you," I said softly, mimicking Lila perfectly. I sank into the couch, my hands trembling. Planning something? I didn't know what that meant, but I knew it wasn't good. I had to anticipate every possible scenario. I had to stay in character perfectly, or we could both be in danger. That day, Mark's behavior became more erratic. Small things, like the way he rearranged items on the counter, the way he scrutinized Lila's notes, the way he questioned minor details, felt like deliberate tests. I realized he was clever, manipulative, and potentially dangerous. I tried to stay calm, to follow Lila's routines, to act perfectly normal. But every step I took was calculated, every word rehearsed. I felt like a tightrope walker above an endless drop. One misstep and everything could collapse. That evening, something happened that truly terrified me. Mark came into the bedroom holding a small box. "I found this in your drawer," he said casually. "I thought you might want it back." Inside was a necklace Lila had cherished for years. The sight of it made my stomach twist. He was watching me, testing my reaction. I forced a smile and said softly, "Thank you." But as he left, I realized something chilling. He wasn't just suspicious, he was calculating, and his intentions were unknown. I spent the rest of the night awake, thinking, analyzing, planning. I knew the week was nearing its climax. The shocking revelation Mark would trigger was coming, and I had to be ready. My impersonation, my ability to stay calm, and my understanding of Lila's life would all be tested to the limit. And deep down, I knew that when it happened, nothing would ever be the same. By the 6th day, I was running on pure adrenaline and fear. Pretending to be Lila had become a constant mental workout, a game of high-stakes survival that left me exhausted and anxious. Every glance from Mark, every question, every tiny gesture made my stomach tighten. I could feel the walls closing in, and I knew something was about to happen. That morning started like any other. Mark was unusually quiet, watching me as I moved through the kitchen, careful to imitate every movement, every tone of voice, every expression Lila had perfected over the years. But there was a sharpness behind his calm that I couldn't ignore. He was planning something, and it terrified me that I didn't know what it was. I tried to keep myself occupied, following Lila's morning routine meticulously. Brew coffee, check emails, fold laundry, make breakfast. But every action felt like a performance, and my mind was exhausted from the constant calculations. Then, just as I was putting the last dish away, Mark cleared his throat behind me. I froze, my hands gripping the counter so tightly I thought I might leave dents in the wood. "You've been hiding something," he said quietly. His tone wasn't angry, but it was cold, deliberate. "I can feel it, and I need to know the truth." My heart stopped. This was it, the moment I had feared all week. I forced a calm smile, imitating Lila perfectly. "I'm not hiding anything," I said softly, my voice trembling ever so slightly. "I promise." He tilted his head, studying me. "Are you sure?" "Yes," I whispered, trying not to let my fear show. For a moment, he didn't respond. Then, he did something that completely shocked me. Instead of anger, instead of confrontation, he smiled, and it was the first genuinely warm expression I had seen from him all week. "I believe you," he said quietly. "I just needed to see for myself." The next day, something happened that shook me more than anything so far. I was in the living room, carefully organizing the bookshelf the way Lila liked it, when Mark came in carrying a small envelope. He handed it to me with a faint, calculating smile. "It came for you today," he said casually. I took it, trying to remain calm. Inside was a letter from a friend of Lila's, thanking her for helping with an event last week. Innocuous, harmless, but the moment felt tense, like a test. He watched me carefully as I read it, his eyes flicking between my face and the envelope. "Thank you," I said softly, mimicking Lila perfectly. I blinked, stunned. My mind raced. This wasn't what I expected. Was he pretending? Was this some manipulation? Then he stepped closer and my heart pounded. "I've been watching you," he said, his voice lower now, almost reverent. "Not in a bad way, just, you're brave, strong. I know Lila would have been too afraid to act, but you—" I stared at him, speechless. Every instinct screamed that this was dangerous, that I should run, that this calm was a trap. But something about his tone, it was different, almost real. I don't understand," I managed to say. He smiled faintly. "You saved her," he said simply. "Even if you didn't know it, you did. You've been living her life, protecting her, and I see it. I respect it." I could barely process what he was saying. After all the fear, all the tension, all the worry that he might discover the truth and lash out, here he was, praising me. It was surreal, almost unreal. Then, as he turned to leave, he paused. "There's something else," he said, looking back at me. "I know why she needed you, and I think I understand. I won't make her life harder anymore. I promise." I felt a wave of relief mixed with disbelief. Could it really be this simple? Could he really be seeing the truth now? My mind was spinning. The man I had feared, the one I thought could expose me at any moment, had just given me a shockingly human response. Understanding. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed every moment of the past week, the fear, the impersonation, the tension, the small victories, and the constant threat of discovery. I realized that pretending to be Lila had not just been about survival. It had been about understanding her life, her struggles, and her resilience in a way I never could have imagined. When I finally drifted off, I felt an unusual sense of calm. The worst, it seemed, was over. The shocking moment, the realization that Mark was not the villain I had imagined, or at least that he had a complex side I hadn't seen, had arrived. But I knew the week wasn't over. There was still one day left, and I had to continue the charade until Lila could safely return. The next morning, I woke to find a note on the kitchen counter. It was from Mark. "Thank you for being her. I'll do better. I owe her and you that much." I stared at it, my hands shaking. The words were simple, but the meaning was enormous. He had acknowledged not only Lila's pain, but also the fact that I had stepped into her life to protect her. The shock wasn't violent or dramatic. It was human, unexpected, and strangely emotional. I knew then that this week would stay with me forever. Pretending to be my sister had been terrifying, exhausting, and emotionally draining, but it had also revealed truths I never could have learned any other way. About her strength, about her struggles, about her husband, and about myself. And I realized something else, something profound. Sometimes the most shocking revelations aren't the ones you expect. Sometimes the shock comes from seeing the humanity in someone you feared, the understanding in someone you thought could never change. I sat at the kitchen table, holding Lila's coffee mug in my hands, thinking about how close I had come to being discovered, how fragile our lives can be, and how strong people can be when they need to protect the ones they love. By the end of the day, Mark's behavior had shifted completely. He was attentive, careful, and respectful in a way I hadn't thought possible. The tension in the apartment had lifted, replaced by something almost normal. Almost. The next day, something happened that shook me more than anything so far. I was in the living room, carefully organizing the bookshelf the way Lila liked it, when Mark came in carrying a small envelope. He handed it to me with a faint, calculating smile. "It came for you today," he said casually. I took it, trying to remain calm. Inside was a letter from a friend of Lila's, thanking her for helping with an event last week. Innocuous, harmless, but the moment felt tense, like a test. He watched me carefully as I read it, his eyes flicking between my face and the envelope. "Thank you," I said softly, mimicking Lila perfectly. When I finally got a text from Lila, "I'm coming home tomorrow. Thank you." Really, I felt a wave of relief and gratitude. I had survived the week. I had protected her. And I had learned more about courage, fear, and resilience than I ever imagined. But I knew one thing for sure. I would never look at Lila or Mark the same way again. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. The apartment felt different, lighter, almost peaceful. For the first time all week, I wasn't on edge. Mark was already up, quietly reading the newspaper at the kitchen table. He looked up as I entered, giving me a nod, a small smile. It wasn't the tense, suspicious stare from earlier in the week. It was normal. Lila was coming home today. I felt a strange mixture of relief, excitement, and anxiety. What would she think of me pretending to be her? Would she be proud, embarrassed, angry? My mind spun through all the possibilities, and I realized just how much I had lived in her skin, thought like her, and carried the weight of her life, even for just a week. Mark's voice broke my thoughts. "She'll be home soon," he said casually, though there was a subtle undertone of something I couldn't place, perhaps relief, perhaps nervousness. I nodded, trying not to overthink. I had rehearsed the reunion in my head countless times, but nothing could truly prepare me for it. When Lila finally arrived, I heard her knock at the door. My stomach twisted with nervous anticipation. I opened it, and there she was, her hair slightly messy from traveling, a tired smile on her face, but her eyes bright and relieved. "Hey," I whispered, barely able to contain myself. She threw her arms around me immediately. "Oh my God," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "Thank you. Thank you so much." I hugged her tightly, feeling the tension of the past week melt away. "You don't have to thank me," I said softly. "I just wanted to make sure you were safe." She pulled back slightly, studying me with those familiar green eyes. "You were incredible," she said. "I can't believe how much you managed to do, how perfect you were at being me. I owe you everything." I felt a lump form in my throat. "It wasn't perfect," I admitted. "There were moments I thought I'd be discovered, moments I thought I couldn't do it. But I had to. For you." She nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. "I know. And you did it. You really did." Mark entered the room at that moment. He froze for a brief second as he saw us together. Then he stepped forward slowly. "Lila," he said, his voice calm and steady. "Welcome home." She gave him a cautious glance, but there was something different in his tone now, softer, more deliberate, almost apologetic. "Mark," she said carefully, "we need to talk." He nodded. "I know, and I'm ready to listen." I stayed in the background, observing, realizing that the week had changed not just me and Lila, but Mark too. His behavior had shifted dramatically after the confrontation, or perhaps after seeing me step into her life. There was an unspoken acknowledgement that things couldn't continue as they had before. The three of us sat down in the living room, and Lila began carefully recounting her experiences, the fear she had lived with, and the reasons she had asked me to step in. Mark listened quietly, nodding at times, occasionally glancing at me as if acknowledging my role in all of this. By the end of the day, Mark's behavior had shifted completely. He was attentive, careful, and respectful in a way I hadn't thought possible. The tension in the apartment had lifted, replaced by something almost normal. Almost. The next day, something happened that shook me more than anything so far. I was in the living room, carefully organizing the bookshelf the way Lila liked it, when Mark came in carrying a small envelope. He handed it to me with a faint, calculating smile. "It came for you today," he said casually. I took it, trying to remain calm. Inside was a letter from a friend of Lila's, thanking her for helping with an event last week. Innocuous, harmless, but the moment felt tense, like a test. He watched me carefully as I read it, his eyes flicking between my face and the envelope. "Thank you," I said softly, mimicking Lila perfectly. "It was more than I realized," he said finally. "I didn't see how hard it was for you, Lila, and I understand now why she had to step in." His eyes met mine briefly, and I could see a flicker of respect, maybe even gratitude. Lila sighed, relief washing over her. "Thank you," she said softly, looking at me. "I don't know what I would have done without you." "I just did what you asked," I said, my voice steady. "I'm just glad you're safe." For the first time all week, I felt like I could breathe. The tension that had gripped the apartment for days, the constant fear, the calculated movements, the hyper-awareness, was finally gone. Lila was home. She was safe. And somehow, despite everything, Mark seemed different. Later, as we all settled down, Lila pulled me aside. "I need you to know something," she said quietly. "I couldn't have done this week without you. You didn't just pretend to be me, you lived my life, my fears, my struggles, and you did it with courage I could never have imagined." I felt my eyes sting. "I learned so much," I admitted, "about you, about Mark, and about myself. It was terrifying, but I also understand you better now." She smiled softly. "I know, and I'm proud of you, more than you'll ever know." That night, as we sat together, I realized how much this experience had changed me. Pretending to be Lila wasn't just about acting or survival. It was about empathy, understanding, and courage. I had walked in her shoes, faced fears I hadn't known existed, and discovered the complexity of the people I loved. Mark, too, seemed to have learned something. There was still a lot to work through between him and Lila, but the tension had lifted. He was no longer the unpredictable, cold presence he had been earlier in the week. Instead, there was a sense of acknowledgement, perhaps even accountability, that hadn't existed before. As I lay in my own bed that night, I reflected on the week. It had been exhausting, terrifying, and emotionally intense, but it had also been illuminating. I had learned the strength of my sister, the subtle complexities of human behavior, and the resilience we can summon when protecting those we love. And as sleep finally claimed me, I realized something important. Sometimes, the most shocking moments aren't the ones that scare us. Sometimes, the shock comes from understanding, from human complexity, and from the unexpected courage that rises when we need it most. I had survived the week pretending to be my sister, but more importantly, I had grown, and I knew that Lila and I, together, were stronger than we had ever realized. The morning after Lila returned home, the apartment felt lighter, almost peaceful. The tension that had consumed every corner, the silent scrutiny, the unspoken tests, the constant fear, was gone. For the first time in days, I could move freely without calculating every gesture, every word. Lila and I spent the morning unpacking her things and chatting quietly. She seemed more relaxed than I had ever seen her in the past year, and there was a sense of ease in her voice that made my heart lift. "I can't believe you lived my life for a week," she said, shaking her head. "You're insane, but amazing." I laughed softly. It felt insane while I was doing it, but I also understand you better now. Your fears, your struggles, everything you've been carrying alone. She paused, thoughtful. "I never wanted you to see it, to know how trapped I felt. But now, I feel like you've really been with me in it, and maybe that's something I needed too." I nodded. I never thought pretending could teach me so much about empathy, courage, and understanding. About you, about Mark, even about myself. Speaking of Mark, his presence was now calmer, more deliberate, and surprisingly attentive. The sharpness and suspicion that had haunted me throughout the week had softened into something cautious, respectful, and even human. It was clear that our week-long masquerade had shifted his perspective. Though Lila and I had no illusions that things would instantly be perfect, there was a visible change. He approached us quietly, holding a cup of coffee for Lila. "I just want to say thank you," he said, meeting my eyes briefly, "for everything you did this week. You saved her in ways I didn't even realize, and you've made me see things differently, about her and about myself." Lila looked at him, cautious but relieved. "I'm glad you see that now," she said softly. "There's still a lot we need to work on, but—" She trailed off, letting the words hang in the air. I realized then that the week had been transformative for all of us, not just about survival, not just about impersonation, but about recognition, accountability, and growth. That afternoon, Lila and I went through the apartment together, straightening things, laughing about small details I had struggled to replicate. "You did a better job than I ever could have imagined," she said, smiling. "Even with the little mistakes." I shrugged, smiling back. It was terrifying, but also enlightening. I saw how strong you are, and I think I'm stronger too, because of it. We spent the evening talking, sharing moments from the week I hadn't told her about, and hearing about her own experiences and fears that she had been too afraid to voice before. The honesty between us was raw, emotional, and deeply bonding. I realized how important it was to truly understand the people we love, not just the surface, but their fears, their challenges, and the burdens they carry silently. Mark, meanwhile, stayed quietly in the background, helping where needed but giving space. It was clear he was processing everything, reflecting on how his actions had affected Lila, and perhaps how my presence had forced him to confront a reality he had never fully acknowledged before. As night fell, I sat in my own room, reflecting on the week. Pretending to be my sister had been terrifying, exhausting, and emotionally intense, but it had also been illuminating in ways I hadn't expected. I had learned about resilience, courage, empathy, and the subtle, complicated dynamics of relationships. I had discovered my own ability to endure and adapt, and I had witnessed firsthand the hidden strength Lila carried every day. Most importantly, I realized that sometimes the most shocking lessons come not from fear or danger, but from understanding and connection. Mark's sudden shift, his acknowledgement of what had happened, and the subtle humanity I glimpsed in him were all moments that reminded me that people are more complex than they appear, and that courage often comes in unexpected forms. By the end of the week, life returned to a semblance of normal. Lila regained her routines, Mark became more thoughtful and attentive, and I stepped back into my own life with a newfound respect for my sister's strength and a deeper awareness of the fragility and resilience of human relationships. As I lay in bed that night, I smiled softly to myself. The week had been a whirlwind of fear, tension, and shock, but it had also been a journey of growth, understanding, and unexpected. She paused, thoughtful. I never wanted you to see it, to know how trapped I felt. But now, I feel like you've really been with me in it, and maybe that's something I needed too. Revelations. And I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, Lila and I were stronger, closer, and more capable of facing the complexities of life than ever before. Sometimes, pretending to be someone else doesn't just change the life you step into, it changes the person you are, the bonds you hold, and the way you see the world forever. And for me, that week would remain unforgettable, not because of the fear, but because of the courage, the empathy, and the humanity I witnessed in ways I never expected.